Let's see how this goes today. Looks like the mic is at least blocking the fan, which I kind of need. I'm going to do some attempt and tweak. Test. So I have Restream working again to try and join the chats. But the challenge is making it work properly. Because it makes it very noisy in my side. So if I can filter out my okay, that's not Restream is not restreaming there. Oh, there it is. Restream bot. So that's posted in Twitch, which is okay for viewers because now the chats are aligned. But it's not okay for me because I see everyone's message twice, so I need to filter out in my chat tool. Ignore user. Okay. That works. Okay, so does this work? Now I need to in Twitch. Twitch.tv, TVD Gamer, chat. So Twitch shows it. Hello, world. There we go. Restream bot shows it. I've got to ignore it on both sides. Ignore user. Okay, that's the sort of thing that's going to come back and bite me later on, though. I'm gonna forget that happens and then want to test something. So the benefit is that the chat should get the messages back and forth, so the chats are aligned and I don't get the noise. And yeah, that should work for now. So let's turn that off. Okay. Let's go and post. Dan started posting in my advertise, which I'm perfectly happy with. I just wish I could watch the streams. Just streams at a time that I don't get to see. Okay. So sadly, today is not back to game dev. I wish it was in some ways because I was kind of making progress, but in the same, I also need to make progress on this application. Otherwise, I'm never going to get it finished, and that's a project that I can't accept giving up on. So let's get things started. And let's stream on all of that. Okay. Oh. What now? Let's close that. Good afternoon, Mr. Jones. How you doing? Not bad. Good to hear. I'm not bad. Got a mile and a half walking this morning, which was good. At 5 a.m. So that was fun. Two dogs that didn't want to settle. So there we go. I walked them to tire them out a little bit. And I think I'm more tired than they are. Okay, so I have no idea where this error has come from. I have no idea why it's happening. And this is going to be the start of my day. I tried to create React, but that's not. But I didn't change anything there. Oh, hold on. Maybe. Yeah, but that shouldn't. Oh, join from compiler CLI. That would be a bad join, wouldn't it? That would be a bad join. Cannot find join. Did you mean instance member? So I have a challenge in that I have a control that's prime ng control, and that control is, there you go. Don't include compiler CLI stuff in your app by accident when trying to do this at 11 o'clock tired. So this control is the multi-select, and it is showing null null, right? Now the value's here, and it knows there's value selected, but when I'm loading the actual project up, I set the values using this set value here, right? So I've loaded the projects and stuff. That they're all definitely set. So the problem comes from the control itself doesn't know how to display what it's got selected, and it doesn't know. It can't show that it's selected an entire object. So I have the option label, and that's what's displaying that. So if I do a prefix there, prefix, whatever you want to say, these will show the prefixes now. So it's working off the object. But when I display the selected values, it doesn't have them selected and they're null. So it's like it kind of works for the behavior. So I can specify a display template which will show the value, but the selected, but it's not selecting what's there, right? So it still doesn't matter if I display these values. If I don't show the ones that are selected, it'll let me add them back in because it doesn't know they're selected. So I assume I've got to specify the option value, right? But even that doesn't select. So what I was trying to do last night is kind of bridge the gap and just send the IDs in. Because now if I do that and put projects, that value here, pipe to JSON, so we can see it on the screen. So when I load into here, right, you'll see there's planning and there's tenant management. It knows they're in the projects object. If I add story, that doesn't change. Why doesn't that change now? Let's pick one that doesn't have anything. Planning. So there's the ID. Story, because now I'm selecting the value of the ID. Right. Which is okay from one perspective, but the issue comes in here. I set the project's equal to an array of project objects, and that does work okay. The user selection is working fine. But then I've also modified that to be my own control because yeah, it works for me. That user selection is still a P auto complete control. I just got the other stuff set up. But I don't think ng model will do anything different, because if that was, then I could create my own version of the control, which again I don't like doing because it's daft to do it that way, right? This doesn't support ng model. So multi-select doesn't even support ng model, so that's outdoor. Which gives me pause for thought on the other one. No, that's not deprecated on autocomplete. It is deprecated on this. So if I switch this out for being string, and then this becomes m goes to m dot id. Object is possible undefined. So that works now. That works now. But when I select them, I'll now have IDs. So, and this is part of the issue, is the two-way binding. What I've done for the two-way binding is I've said, okay, well, because I could collect projects before, my object that I use to pass the data to the actual, it's over in here, that's the challenge. When I'm adding the planning component, I'm just passing the value, but now I'm going to select IDs. Right, because now that control is that. Yeah, if I do option value equals ID, right, that's great, but now this is a list of string, and this add planning item now is incorrect because the planning item service takes a planning item, and a planning item is apparently undefined. Oh, there you go. This is a list of projects. So I've created an object that meets both needs in that it's full featured enough that I can get everything I want, but I can't use it for create and update and query, etc. Now, ultimately, when it does add the planning item, I'm getting the ID, right? Because I don't pass the entire planning item up. So the right thing to do here is to get rid of this, and these projects are the IDs themselves, because in every case I use the ID. So one thought. Delete message, ban, moderation. Let's see if that changes anything. So one idea I have here is to make this more command-based. And then instead of passing a planning item in, I create a add planning item command. And that is, again, I don't know if it's necessarily the right thing to do to kind of create some weird mediated pattern on the client side, but it would allow me to better describe the system, and this hidden rule as such would not be as much of a challenge, because right this second, the way this is now, it's broken because this is going to pass an array of IDs, which is then going to collapse on the side. So one idea I have is, let's create a directory called commands, and let's do a add planning item command. It helps if that's a TypeScript file. Hey Jeffin, how are you? I'm good. I'm good. We're doing some app dev. I'm gonna try and get this this UI working today. How have you been? So export interface, add planning item command, and then it's going to look similar to planning item right a second. In terms of it's going to look like this, with a few exceptions. This is going to be a list of strings. That's going to be a list of string. That isn't. Those aren't necessary, right? We do export interface. Command. Implements. Interface extends. Command. Well, this is a marker interface, right? So then what I'll do is I'll go to the planning store. This is just me trying to figure this out. Whether I want to do it this way or not, I don't know. So what we're doing there is, instead of doing this command, async send command is send p command p. There's a way of constraining generics in TypeScript. I just went to my C#. TypeScript. Generic constraints. Oh, okay. So it's that where you'd say extends command. Right. Yeah, I don't like that, because it doesn't necessarily know. So one of the benefits of doing it this way is, this is going to be a challenge. The planning item is the object I create, and then the hey Apex, how are you? So right now I set all the values of the planning item, and then I add the planning item, and then I patch that into the state, so I have that object available. Well, doing this way, I don't have, even though I had the projects available to me here, they're not available to me now, because that planning item won't have those things. It will just have IDs. If I continue this way. So, and I'm still learning my way around NGRX and Signal Store, but so I don't know what the correct way of joining the two is. But I definitely have some form of chicken and egg going on, right? Where I've got my thing. So if I'm in edit mode, this works if I have IDs. If I'm in create mode, this can work with the IDs, but then the item that's created that appears in here isn't going to function the same way as it does now, because it's not going to have all the information available to it. So these tags that appear aren't going to be populated unless I do some further querying on the object. So can I transform an item after I've saved it? by joining the relevant information. Well, that means that seems to be a bad design because the planning item store doesn't know about the other stores and probably shouldn't do. The how do I iterate on the UI UX conversation from yesterday? See, yeah. Damon 8, welcome in. Thank you very much for the follow. So the challenge with this right this second is not so much. I mean, iterating on the UI is obviously the thing that I'm focused on, but again, I've got a design challenge in so much as my and I decided to go the full path of making this an editable form and start that process of being allowed to edit the things because it is a reasonable thing to do, right? Yeah. From a workflow perspective, it's no point just displaying all this information. It doesn't add value to my application to do it this way. To do it just all as read only. This would be a realistic expectation that you can go in here and say, okay, well, actually, I need to change the project this is attached to and save that. But it works okay in the add case to have them selected as objects and then map them, because then I've got a fully populated project on a fully populated planning item. But now with just the ID selected, I then have to do some additional manipulation. There's no need for read-only mode in this case. The only time you would want read-only is if the user doesn't have permissions to edit, but that's a different behavior entirely, right? I can decide later whether I want to make that an actual view mode. But right now I do not have a requirement that if you can see this data, you're allowed to change this data right this second. So I'm kind of in a bit of a limbo right this second. Also, I should have cut down on the noise in my chat window, so the restream should be working just fine between YouTube and Twitch. Yeah, improvements. Thank you for the look, Apex. This should be ID or select. That's just minor. That's me procrastinating. Assigned user. Okay. So see, in the editing form, you have to have the labels. In the create form, the labels are kind of in the fields, and it works fine. I'll work on the consistency of that later. Showing the badges up here is just a nicety. I think it does add to the instant readability, but we'll come back on that later. So my dilemma is when to attach. When is too much data attached? And I think I end up with different models is the problem. As you were. So what I do right now is when I add the planning item component, right, I get the store and I call add planning item, and that passes that down, which right this second is going to pass an array of strings. In that store, in the write mode, we have add planning item, and in here we pass in a planning item, which is now fully populated in the current version, right? It would be populated now in this version. It will become just a list of IDs of the assigned projects, associated projects. When we add the planning item on that returning success, or on that completing, we then set the ID equal to the identifier we return, because the API call will return the identifier. We then can track that entity by that ID. And now we can add that entity into the store. So now we have a planning item that we have. This will still function if I, change this to be a list of IDs. It will still function, but this will be incorrect because it'll just have a list of IDs. So what would happen is these would all be blank. It'd know they're there because they're just IDs, but it wouldn't have a name, so it'd just be blank until I then load that object up some other way. I'm not sure on the value of returning the object itself. So right now I return the identifier. There's no, it can't do that because the server side, the API side of this is not the owner of that data. So it can't even return that data even if it wanted to. And I'd be making a mess of the API side if I did. Because the API that this is going to just tracks the planning item. It doesn't track the projects. It doesn't track anything like that. So even then, internally, it only has IDs. So it's not the responsibility of that API to return that data. So I'm back to a transform of some form. So when I add the planning item and save it, then I ultimately have to transform the planning item into the right thing, because right now this is essentially the add planning item command, right? Add planning item here is I'll worry about whether I'm just differentiating command right now just so I can get my brain around it, because the command has arrays of IDs here. It does not have the actual data. Hello, Fushnabel, how you doing? Welcome in. Hope you're well. If anyone has any questions, thoughts, or opinions on this, I'm always open to discuss it. As some well know. It's an interesting challenge and one that often comes up in different forms based upon how you design your API. I'm going through security issues detected by a security tool we use. That yawn is well timed. But oof, that's not my idea of fun on a Wednesday. I mean, some of them, like that checked in secrets, like those are just face palm moments, right? Like, oh, we did this. Ugh. But that's a common problem, right? We don't always think about what we're doing. And sometimes we're doing it just to get it moving forward, which is my problem here. I've got two choices. I can try and jam it in and make it happen, make it work, or I can try and, sit and think about the design and make sure that the result is something that I'm happy with. Work standards are not constant either. Sadly, yes. Yeah, mistakes happen. That's something that we some people struggle to embrace more than others. Yeah, yeah. It's hard to adhere to those work standards. What are those? Good morning, Cody Crossman. How you doing? Welcome in. I think most here shares the sentiment that it's not particularly exciting, but I suppose I'm more worried over this than others. It's an important piece. It might not be the most exciting piece to do, but it is a very important piece. I think, programming and development in general is littered with the we'll deal with this later. Or yeah, we don't have to worry about that now. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, I've seen plenty of it, but I've only ever once been responsible for clamping down on security issues. It was an API I developed, and it took me all of 30 minutes to patch the security issues that I didn't know about. So I got to be educated a little bit. Yeah, we use the OWASP tool to identify things before we had a security audit, so that we could try and get that. And also, if you actually submit anything to Salesforce, so we have an API. Well, we had an API. It was the previous company. We had an API that would provide data to a Salesforce API, to a Salesforce integration we had written. But in that event, that API also needs to be secured, and Salesforce need to agree with it. So yeah, so I got to do that. Change your keys and stop committing tokens. I have 100 repos at work that I'm working through to get things like passwords out of code, lots of legacy code to go through and fix. Ripping that out of source control, no thanks. Can't you just rotate your key instead? That is what we need to do, but to be honest, we'll have more secrets committed if it happens. Yeah, I mean, there's protections you can put on things now. You can kind of look for certain patterns. You can look for the detection tools within GitHub as well, I think, actually start doing that now. But the big challenge is, if you're going to keep any of those things, is pulling them out of the history of Git, which is an absolute mess. And I think we went through that with someone the other week, right? Talking about you can remove it, but it is a absolute nightmare in GitHub. Yeah. 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 Right, but you also, you gotta be careful you don't reveal. I mean, if you reveal that people also have insight into how things are working as well. So it's not just about the value, is it? GitHub is made to record stuff, so getting it out is inherently a difficult problem. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So my colleague, my last place, he before we committed any of the new project code, he basically went through and he made sure that our dev machines all ran on no password, and generic DB name, so we could check out the code, and those connection strings could stay there, but they were never touched after the fact. So they created one connection string, and that was it. So it was always loading that one, but there was no password, no username, no actual production style connection string ever committed to the repo. Yeah, the private repos are, but we ran on a public platform, right? And if you're using GitHub, it's still a public platform, which means it's still not 100% private, right? If it's internal, fully internal. But what do we do with the secrets that we're in the heads of devs we can't trust? Well, some more drastic measures are required there. Most of our apps run with some level of impersonation, so most of the newer .NET stuff only has alias names database. So yeah. Yeah. Sachin, hello, how are you doing? What is the tech stack that you're using to build this project? So I am using .NET, so C# in the back end. So we're using .NET 8 with Kafka and Mass Transit. There's other stuff, SQL Server, and some Redis stuff in here, and some API gateway technology. Yeah, there's a lot on the back end. And then on the front end, it's an Angular application using PrimeNG for components. And I'm just kind of working through a feature right this second. The application is distributed. A modular monolith, I suppose, is the closest it comes. So each component of the system is built and interacts through Kafka. Let's see if my diagram's up. Are you from Jersey? I live in New Jersey. I'm not from New Jersey. I'm not even from the old Jersey. Yeah, not South Jersey. Central Jersey. Tom's River area. That's what they call it here. My other problem, I know that Trap's from this area as well. My other problem security-wise is I can't get the front-end team to care to address the issues found. Yeah, if you're doing this off your back, nice. If you're doing this off your own back, then it's a little bit more challenging. If a security audit happens and they light a fire under your management team, the front end team care a lot more, right? It shouldn't require a fire, but it often does. I know we've just gone through a whole lot of effort on CSRF and all those sorts of things. I suppose we'll have to wait for a security incident to happen, and then they might care a bit more. There's an audit can be a reason. That's wild. I've not worked at a company that doesn't take security seriously. You've been very lucky in your career, Apex. A lot of companies don't take it seriously until it becomes a problem. I'm in Los Angeles. I love it. Nice toast to wave. Well, good morning, by the way. I didn't say that, I think. I agree. I've been very lucky. Yeah, you've managed to land on your feet there. Do they want update libraries because that's part of security? Also, majority of companies never recover from a security incident. Average cost is like 5 million or something to recover. How long have you been working on this? So this project I've been working on for about 9 months now. A couple of days a week. I don't get a lot of spare time on it, so most of it is just the 6 hours of stream I've dedicated to it a week. I mean, the general flow is working. So basically, the reason I brought the diagram up is the system's broken down into components, so the modular monolith component, and then publishes its data to Kafka and is consumed into right now, just a GraphQL API, so that all the data gets consolidated down, and the client is querying its data from the GraphQL and pushing its data to the APIs via the API gateway. My luck is part of what makes it so interesting hearing about other companies. Yeah. One of the issues, the library that should be updated to address a serious flaw. You could get a lot done in 6 hours a week if you just ignore me. I mean, I could get a lot done, but I see streaming as a way to share what I'm doing, kind of also, validate, if anyone has other ideas or opinions on what I'm doing. I'm always open to discussion about it, right? It's part of why I do stream, is because part of why I love development is that engagement with others and being able to discuss ideas and say, hey, I like this, I don't like this, have those opinions, and I can always learn something new. I could tell people if I didn't want to be interrupted, I wouldn't stream. Yeah. I also find myself, when I have moments of focus in streaming, that I'm actually pretty, I can get a lot done. You get buy-in on that one. Devs hate old frameworks libraries. Yeah. So, yeah, Sasha, if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts or opinions on what you're seeing, you're more than welcome to join in. It looks like Restream's doing a pretty good job of sharing the chat between the two channels, so that's awesome. I don't mind old frameworks as long as they don't have security issues. Sometimes it's easy to not upgrade them. The challenge is always when, right? So I have a challenge right this second, right? This is Angular 17. Angular 18 released the other week. When should I upgrade? Well, because I'm in early dev, I should upgrade now. So I tried, and it did not go well. You've got to choose when to do that and look at the cost of, what does it involve? Especially like things like .NET. .NET is moving at a faster pace than it's ever really done, right? .NET 9 is coming around, and now you've got the LTS releases. .NET, if you've built anything on .NET 7, you either upgrade to .NET 8 because it is an LTS release, I think, or .NET LTS releases. Because if you're one of those unlucky people that actually does manage to find a bug that needs to be covered, right, then you need to make sure you've got the support there in an organization. Shining new version .NET 1.1 in production. One upgrade is justifiable to also on 3 and 4 and 5 a second. But you've also got to take that time to do it, and you've got to test it. You've got to, if you don't have, as an organization, you don't have good faith in your ability to test regression, an upgrade is way scarier. One upgrade is just one upgrade. Yeah, I agree. You don't want to get too far behind. Speaking of .NET, we ran into an automapper problem from .NET 6. As a systems infra guy, I'm happy with old. Typically better supported, understood, tested. But it's a transient dependency, yeah. 100% upgrade can be scary. So, as a development team, coordinating an upgrade of a library, coordinating a framework change of .NET's magnitude. .NET, the last couple of versions, has been generally safe to just change the number, right? And it's worked. And if there's security issues that come along with it, you can actually go and just identify them separately. Angular, not so much. They deprecate features. They do all sorts between versions. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that changes in Angular 18 over 17. Now, from the looks of it, I'm not affected, but there is a whole lot to worry about. And being that it's the UI, if I introduce instability, it's going to get noticed quicker than on the back end, potentially. So it's picking that time. One of my next tasks is to work on a pattern for backwards compatibility testing, so that will be nice. Have fun. Depending on the dev team size you work with and their willingness to do stuff, that can be challenging. That's the automapper we haven't seen with problems. Is automapper need actually a side effect to put in properties that don't need to be there into the main logic? I don't use automapper. I've tinkered, and I don't believe in using any mapping libraries. But then again, my style of code right now is pretty much small pieces, isn't it? How do you log issues from the front end to a centralized log? One thing I've seen for that is basically, obviously you could use client libraries for things like Datadog and stuff. If you're doing it yourself, then it's creating a library to just stream logs up to the server, right? Yeah. If you have a development team that is, and ads are going to start in a few minutes. I apologize if you're affected by them. Unfortunately, that is Twitch. I do them every 30 minutes for a minute and a half to try and cut down the length of time. I'm concerned about exposing DD keys to front end, and also DD keys can get expensive. So if a bad actor wants to hurt us, they can spam the log. Yeah. It's, for me, I haven't solved that problem for you yet in this. In other places I've done, I've hooked in SignalR to stream the logs up to the server and then gone from there. I've tried a few different things. Logging is something I'm not a big fan of. I would rather log an exception when it is an exception than I would log anything just randomly. So my general rule is not to add logs unless I really, really need it. I stay away from cloud and web generally, but good to get out of one's normal zone once in a while for educational reasons. That's incredibly true. It is important to keep doing things you're not necessarily comfortable with. And for me, looking at cloud and AI stuff is something that I haven't done enough, kind of fallen behind on, and I'm questioning whether I really need to focus on that, in the back end of my career. Could you make an API for the log, send the FE log to the server on a different endpoint, and upload to data from the back end? That's kind of what I would probably move to if you were worried about the rate, but it doesn't prevent the spamming. It just prevents the client ID being taken, right? Logs are awesome. They show the errors of your ways and are more easily fixable. Good logging, intelligent logging is awesome. but not random logging, which is most of what I've seen. So I'm not debating that certain logs are necessary, right? But if you use logging too much, you make it harder to understand what's actually going on, because you have to filter through the noise. I debug and develop using the logs, so foster good logs. So it says it's kind of needed to figure out usage and how big a problem the error is. Is your front end going to be responsive for mobile screens as well? Because for me, it becomes really painful when it comes to handling different types of screen sizes. I would just start doing front end. So right this second, it's not a focus for me. Let me just fix this error, and then the UI will at least show. So right this second, it isn't a primary focus, right? So you can see it's not really very responsive. This application is not one that I would want to use on a phone, but it is something that I will deal with at some point. Coding Craftsman, thank you very much for the look. Thank you for coming, hanging out, and joining the chat. Much appreciated. So yeah, it is a challenge. In this case, I'm using PrimeNG for the controls. See, this oval, this works well in the mobile screen, right? So if I'm adding data, this isn't a bad design. I kind of like this method of doing forms. So I'm using PrimeNG and I'm using Tailwind for layout, and Tailwind will allow me to kind of hide these controls and change the style, but it is a time-consuming process. We had a FODweaver inject in logs for a while, and that didn't work. I've been messing with responsiveness and concluding it's very difficult. Oh, it absolutely is. It's very difficult. I think a good log is like a good UI. You have to take care with it. The log level should be chosen carefully. Yeah. Stripping out unnecessary logging before you go live. Cutting down fluff. Like, I hate looking in logs and saying here, random value, got here, because people have not gone through and dealt with those debugging logs later. Like for the client side, console logs make more sense when I'm debugging stuff. On the server side, I will rarely use console logs to tell me anything. I'll often use breakpoints. The only time that gets challenged is when you're doing async stuff, because you might not actually get what you think you're getting. Yeah, at some point, I do have a branch sat here for open telemetry, and I'm gonna have to delete that one and start again, because I've changed a lot since then. But open telemetry is something I do want to add in, and I think there was a talk added to my playlist on YouTube not too long ago to go back over that and review it. Because you got the difference between what do you want to know, right? From a development perspective, you kind of want to know what failed and as close to where it failed and why it failed as possible, right? So how do you gain that information? From a management perspective, you kind of want to know how often are things failing, and a developer side, I suppose, and what is the usage like. So metrics matter very much to management. Detail matters very much to the development team and the support team. So it's a balance that I'm kind of holding off on, because it's something that I think once I've got enough data flowing through the system, it'll be a little easier to handle. You have a weird reflection on your face. Yes, I have blinds, which I cannot change the angle of the sun. I have two windows right in front of me there, and fortunately this time of day, the sun is beaming straight in there. So, and just renovate your kitchen. That'll fix it. If you get stream from my kitchen. That's funny because that's funnier for me because I actually did talk to my wife about, can we rip the kitchen up, please? I might take some time off over the summer and just tear everything out. I have no idea what I'm doing to put it back, but it'll be fine. Okay, so I have a design challenge in this. I'm procrastinating here, so it's good that the chat got very chatty. I appreciate the conversation. It's allowed me to be completely distracted and not do this. So the problem lies in the fact that I have two sides to this. Right? I have I'm using this object. I gotta work. Good luck all. Delta, thank you very much for coming hanging out and for as always. Have a great day and take care. You had a 33% chance of getting it right. Options for kitchen, bedroom, and dedicated streaming office. I have a dedicated room for my my hobby den, which has too much stuff. So I have three walls of video games around me, and the wall that I don't have video games on has the windows in it. So okay. So I'd be interested to know how people would handle this. If you have any thoughts or opinions. So right now, I have a form that captures a set of model values. So if I go here, well, if you had put the games in the window wall, you'd solve the reflection issue. But I have a new issue. I'd have faded video game boxes. I might not be in it to make serious money off my game collection, but I don't want to fade 30-year-old video game boxes. So when I collect the data, I put it in a planning item. The planning item is the same object I'm using here, right? Because it's in a signal store. It works currently because this is a list of objects, and when I select these, it actually stores the objects. So when I post it to the server, I just pull out the objects, but then I've got this information, and I've got all this associated data in that single planning item object, right? So I have the assigned user, which is a user object, which has a name and an ID. I have associated projects, which have ID and name, and it works perfectly. Well, it works perfectly here. Now I go to edit it. To get these to show up, I can't use the object. I have to use AID. This one works fine. This one has no issue. But is it a good practice to just use the same object for all the things? If I was on the server side, I'd be translating objects, right? I'd be saying, okay, well, when I do it, when I go to add a planning item in my API, I pass in a set of parameters, which is that list. It's the same thing on the client, right? This is what would work on the client, but I don't have this. I then translate it into a command, and then that translates into a data model, right? So I'm not using the same object at every stage like I'm on the client. So if I do switch this out, so right now, the challenge is this, right? Right. If it's a planning item, everything works fine. This will work. It will save that when it goes to the actual service. It will then map those IDs. If I just pass the IDs in, I have an issue in that I don't have this model then, because these will just be IDs on the model. Yeah, the shared IDs, GUIDs. They're not DB primary keys now. There's no primary keys in the client. But if I do it the way I want to do it right now, then I have to figure out a way of hey Guesty, how you doing? How's things? Mr. Anhorn, good morning. We're back to our regularly scheduled programming. I don't know how. But YouTube recommended this to me again. But anyways, did you fix yesterday bug? Yeah, I did. Yeah, the bug yesterday was caused by the fact that I was setting the target in the ready before I'd actually set the global position, so that the calculation was incorrect. It was based off 0, 0. So once it was set at the right point, it worked fine. It was the order in which I was doing things. Interesting that it recommended the stream to you again, being that it's not set as game dev today. It's set as app dev. So let me explain that issue a bit more, though. Apex. I almost said Delta then. I apologize. So I have an object. Right. And that object, like right now, can contain an array of project objects, right? It's a nested array of, and this is ID is GUID, name is project. And that works fine as a planning item model, right? This is what this is using to display, because it can say, okay, get all my projects, get everything else associated, get my associated user, all right, associated user or assigned user is again an object that has an ID and a name and it can display that. That's fine. In this form, I can use the planning item because this will allow me to populate the list with a list of projects, a list of these, and I can select them and I can hit save. And then because I can use a planning item, they all fit into the nice planning item object. It creates a new planning item object. It then passes that down to the service. The service then takes that and manipulates it to get the IDs out of the projects and the user ID, etc. Right? It pulls all those things off. Created by is because I'm making the request. It knows that I don't need to pass that specifically. And it passes up the arrays of IDs. That works perfectly fine. It all saves properly. That's great. Now when I go in here and load the object back, this doesn't like having objects. This needs IDs to be able to set these. So this has to be an array of IDs. The problem is it can't now fit in the exact same shape as the other one. So I could. So again, I've got the add planning item here. This used to say project, right? On this side though, I can't do that. So now I've got completely different behavior between the two forms. And when I'm loading up the object, I now have to map these IDs out to get them to select. But then when I select them, right, I just want the IDs of those selected. So it's the inconsistency is going to introduce confusion later because the behavior between the add and the edit is totally different. So should I make the add and the edit function the exact same way and both have IDs, but then I have to translate that somewhere? Because if I do it that way, to make the planning item look like this after I've saved, I don't have this information available, so I have to actually go and join different stores together to get the information I need now. So the way this is working is when I don't know how much you've used NGRX or React equivalents, Redux, etc. I'm disconnecting the front end from the API through these stores, right? So I have the signal store sat in the middle, which is actually storing the current version of the data. But the store doesn't contain all the state. I have different stores for different data. And my design could be off, right? I could be misusing the signal stores. It feels like it should be okay, but then I have another challenge. Where? Who owns doing that, right? So right now the store the actual store itself stores the planning item, right, and tracks the planning item. The planning item has all the various data attached to it. Do you inject other stores inside of a store? See what I mean? And then this planning item is what's added, but this is not what's sent in. What's sent in, and I kind of create a command to kind of mimic what I actually want to use to go back and forth. And it's not even add planning item command. That's just to try and make sure I differentiate. So the quick answer is make it behave differently. when I update the planning item, I won't have the projects attached. But the problem then is I won't have the projects attached, so I defer the behavior till the update. Now, here comes the challenge of distributed computing. On the add, or on the edit, either way, if I send the command to do something, I am not guaranteed that the view state has changed at all, right? It might change now. It might change an hour from now. It shouldn't do. It should change within seconds if the system's up and running properly and it's scaled out correctly, right? But it could take some time, and that's kind of one of the benefits and one of the drawbacks of this style of design is that you end up with a great amount of flexibility in terms of data's organized, it's fast to insert because there's not a lot of fluff in there. These databases are very clean and tuned to what they need to be. The view database is able to accommodate all those quirks that business wants. Oh, we want to see this on this screen, this on this screen. Okay, we can make that happen. We don't have to change the backend stores. We don't have to change the data structure. We just have to change the view structure and make it as messy as you want it. But we can later reflect on that and rebuild it all with little to no cost because APIs can stay in place. But the problem there is I can't just turn around and query it, right? So when I go and I save something, so if I go here, when I go and save it, right, so I go add planning item, I pass in all this data, I go to the store, the planning item store has this right, this add planning item says, okay, well, call the service, call add planning item, save that, and then if I pass IDs in here instead of actual objects, then turn around, instead of patching, load the data, right, like pull it from the server. But you can't do that because you don't know that it's available yet. This can't do it because this API itself, this API doesn't have enough information, right? This planning API here, it doesn't have the information. All it has is those IDs that have passed it. And that's correct. It shouldn't know about, it shouldn't need to know about anything to do with the projects. Planning should not be making any decisions based upon the projects because they're not a primary concern of it, right? If I had some weird funky rules like, oh, well, if the project is this name, which even in business, I would argue, why the heck do you want to do that? Nope, can't do it. Can't return the state. Doesn't have the state. This only has those IDs. It does not have the objects. No right API understands the state of the object as it's viewed. It only understands the data it is concerned with. Projects are stored over here in the tenant management because they are a global concern to the tenant. But the IDs don't matter, right? If the store, again, separation of concerns, the only things on the client side that know about those IDs are the stores. Is it okay, or is it even acceptable to inject a store into another store? Or is this store not doing everything it should do? Is aligning a store, an NGRX store, with an entity the wrong problem? Right. Yeah. So what I could do is instead of injecting the planning item, right, I could do the add planning item command thing again, right? I could send in something different, right? And then when I get that, create a new planning item, right, equals this. And the actual projects and stuff, I could, if I had the access to it, project store dot fetch, and then give it the list of IDs. Right? I could do something like that, but that would involve injecting another store into the store. Is that good practice? I don't know. I haven't done enough of this. And there's not enough documentation on their site to say whether that's a good practice or not, or what's the way of handling this. Where, so am I suffering from bad data design? In the post request, I return the ID of the entity that you stored. That's the only thing I return in the post. This ID. It's, yep, I got it. Here's your ID. That's the confirmation you've stored it. Why? Why return the entire object? It doesn't matter. The client state has that in there in the store. And the even if it could return, all it would return essentially is that with a list of IDs for those things. I'd still have to figure out what these IDs are somewhere. So at best, it could return that object with the IDs, and I still have to go and figure out what the projects are. So there's no value in returning the object. The ID is the only thing I care about because it's the thing that's, yeah. But it can't do that. It can't return the full objects. It doesn't know about them. So planning item knows about planning stuff, right? When I pass this up, the projects are just an association with it, right? All they are is a list of IDs. It doesn't even need to validate that they're correct. It just needs to say, hey, by the way, it's associated with this data. So it doesn't need to know about projects at all. This planning database has no concept of projects. It just knows that I've got a list. I've got a list of IDs associated projects with my planning item. When it publishes that list of IDs. The view is what combines all those pieces of information together and builds up an actual object. Right. So the GraphQL API is what pulls all the information together. The benefit of that is these databases only store what they need. They don't store a bunch of fluff, which also means that this can't return a full object because it has no knowledge of the full object. It only knows IDs. It knows the planning data that's stored, the name, the title, the description, the review date, etc., but it doesn't know a project or an associated user. It has no concept of them. You have to have this piece for that to happen. But this won't be there yet. I'm following, but which API is between the server and the client? Which API is between the server and the client? I mean, all of them. I mean, the API gateway is going to distribute requests to the relevant API. These are all independent APIs. My documentation style might be off, but these are all independent APIs. So I go to planning, right, and I go here. What you'll see is that this is just a list of GUIDs. The reason being that when it goes into add planning item, it associates the projects, right? Now that associated projects is just a list of IDs. So the data store for that looks like this, right? Planning item ID to project identifier. It doesn't even need to have an internal ID. When it publishes that information to Kafka, by the time it gets to the view, there's a planning item, right? And there's an associated project, which now has primary keys because these are primary keys to this database. So projects here, there's a projects. So associated projects now links planning item to project ID. So the isolation of data means that no API knows all the information it needs. It can have associated data, that's okay, but it doesn't have enough information. So again, on the client side, to get those objects to be hydrated, I would have to read them from here or pull their relevant stores who are holding onto that information locally, because the store acts as a buffer, right? It's a current version. So I don't go to the GraphQL API for projects. In essence, what I could do is I could actually make the GraphQL API tell me when data changes. So I just don't make API calls unless I need to. And actually have some of that in place where once the data hits here, it notifies the client and says, oh, by the way, I updated you, so you can go and pull some extra information now, right? Because you've got more available. So you don't make unnecessary API calls. But it does mean that because of the distributed nature, you can't rely upon that. You can't rely upon the timing of that. You have to build your system that way. So I can make it work. It's a common pattern. It's a common SPA pattern. It cuts down on a lot of data unnecessarily being pulled, right? It speeds up access to that data. The API, the UI becomes snappier because it doesn't have to make API. It doesn't have to make queries all the time. What I do is when I go in here, when I navigate into an object, I go and say, hey, do I need extra data, by the way? And I merge that data in the object. So if I haven't pulled notes and requirements, etc., I don't attach them to this object unnecessarily. I pull them in at the time I go into that request. So, yeah, when I load the detail, it will merge, it will do this build changes for the item. So it will actually determine, oh, what do you need to change, by the way? So if you've got pending updates, so if the server side has told you, by the way, there are pending updates to this object, go and merge this detail in now. Otherwise, don't change it. And otherwise, just pull, just update these values. You don't have to go and reset all these values, etc. So this is pass one at that idea. But the ultimate idea would be that the server tells the client, by the way, you've got some more information and you can now change it for a more reactive UI. And you'll see it more often than you think in applications. But my problem is my understanding of the store is not strong enough. My use of the technology is I'm inexperienced in that specific aspect. So I've got to learn. So if I did it this way, where I said, okay, well, go and add the data, but now when you've completed that and you've got an identifier back, let's go and actually fetch the detail from the other stores. It wouldn't make an API call necessarily. It would just merge that data from those things because the store would have that data. But yeah. Also, my use of stores, I think there is a way of making a store global versus local so that you don't have, so the same store can persist across many screens. But either way, this is a challenge I've got to figure out how to overcome, right? I've got to figure out what path am I taking here, because it's going to be, I want to be consistent. but consistency is going to be harder to achieve here because of the different behavior. If this control actually understood how to take a list of objects and map it back out again, this would not be a problem. This one control is actually creating this problem right now. I think my difference is that I would expect on the way back for the hydration to happen versus having the front end hydrate things, but I'm not sure if that's any better design. Right. But it is, and it's impossible design for the application as it's architected now. That is not a feasible design to get it hydrated on the server side. And it's not a pattern I would want to do. This has made the more sense than any other application I've worked on, in terms of why I would do it this way. It might seem convoluted, it might seem difficult, but it does create a lot of flexibility and a lot of speed. Just when you hit things like this. Again, if this control could accept that list of objects, because it works for save, right? It's the same control. If I remove that, it will give me a selected object, right? This will work with that now, right? It will select the objects. The problem is when it's loading back up, it doesn't behave that way. So if it knew it had a list of objects and it would map the identifier, it would work fine. Because all the data is valid, everything's good. And then they would both work exactly the same. So it's this edit functionality that's actually the challenge here. But again, in the name of consistency, if I'm going to change this to accommodate that, I want to change the add to make sure it's the exact same, but that might cause more problems. So this is what I'm using here, right? Signal store. So Atlassian and Bitbucket use a proxy API to hydrate. A proxy API. What do you mean by that? There's nothing in your backend design that says you couldn't hydrate. You just need another API layer. Another API layer isn't going to help in that respect, because the problem is the information is not available to it. The only place the information is available to it is in the read API, right? So the read API is not the same as the write API, right? Right now that's GraphQL. It could be anything. It could be search. It could be all sorts of stuff, right? It's, again, ultimately it lives behind a gateway. I just make API calls, and it cares. It distributes to the right piece. So if they're making a call to an API to hydrate, they're doing a read API, right? So the challenge with that is that in this instance, the data may be available, but the data might not be available as well. So I could read from the API. I could read from the GraphQL side and pull the detail. But the problem is those projects that were updated. Let's say I go in here and I say, okay, well, actually, this one is going to be associated with planning and ticketing. And I hit save. That is going to go up here. It's going to update that there. It's going to publish a Kafka event, right? That's going to go into here, and then ultimately the consumers for this are going to read it. That's going to have returned that it did it immediately, almost immediately. The client then would have to say, gotcha. Okay. I'll just wait a minute, because if this system's turned off, or there's a problem, or that it's particularly under load, that list of projects that I'm now associated with could be a while, right? So I can't just immediately turn around and query from another API. To get that data, because it wouldn't be available to me. It might not have made it into the read database yet. So once it makes it to the read database, yeah, I can query. But that's why I'm saying, like, for certain things, I want to push events down to the client and say, by the way, you've got your information now. Here you go. Right. So I could push that back down to the client. I have the ability, because I have a GraphQL subscription. I could say, oh, by the way, this planning item changed. You have this planning item. Here you go, and push the current model down to the client. So I wouldn't need to worry about it, because the moment it happened, this would be sat there with nothing on, and then all of a sudden you'd see pop up appear as those happened as the backend pushed it in. I could follow that pattern. But I could put all manner of APIs in, but it's still not going to fix my problem, in so much as I don't have that data immediately available to me. If I made another API call to anything else, it would have to understand all these different things. They also have a concept of repository IDs. Repository is in... I mean, considering the size of the application, I'd be surprised if they're not using Redux. You can probably see that as well if you bring up like the tools and install Redux. It's not working for me because it's a signal store. They don't support signal stores in this, I don't think. It's a design challenge. This is what I love doing. But if you look at Redux, you might actually be able to see. And yeah, this is because I'm using Signal Store. I don't think this tool supports Signal Store. It is a challenge. I'm using one model to store everything though, and I think that's a downfall, but also an upside. If I learned how to use signal stores differently, maybe there is a pattern there that supports joining signal stores together, where I can join those queries in memory. Having the signal store definitely speeds up that application. Right, it means I can navigate, I can open things quickly. This will actually go and load more data, but it doesn't have to pause while it does that, right? So these are really there on the client. So they are loading. But this edit story is a difficult one. Sorry, I keep moving the microphone and realize it does make noise. But I'm taking my time because I think it's something worth taking my time over, to think through this and not just try and make, because it would be very simple if this was a job, right? It would be very simple to just kind of stick this in, right? It would be very simple just to say, okay, well, just make it work, and yeah, you're fine. Because especially as I haven't created the edit side of this yet, I could do it that way. It just feels not necessarily the right way to make it work, to make them so wildly inconsistent, different. So I think if I want to move forward in the most pragmatic way possible, right? Because again, I haven't got the API for this yet. This is worth doing. It's not so wildly inconsistent that it's not easy to see the differences. It's hard to, at a glance, understand why they behave slightly differently, right? And again, if this control understood what an object was, this would not be a problem. Or what an object was on the read side of things. It's this that's the actual problem inside of this. And I've looked at the code and I can't figure it out. I don't know if I'm going to get anywhere near this. P. I don't know if they have the actual control. Multi-select. Yeah, that's a bit of a whopper, that one. So, right value. So this value is value. This is an array of objects in the version as it would be. This model value that's referenced all over the place. So I'm not sure I fancy trying to debug and make a PR against a library to try and figure that out. So we're left with one less than ideal option. An option that I reserve for, only the worst cases. I don't like that. But that at least makes me understand why the difference, if I look at this code, and also maybe PrimeNG changes that behavior and provides me the ability. So I'm not going to litter the comment throughout everything, but it's not something that I like doing, but that would allow for the inconsistency and give me some indication as to why it's different. Because that's more likely where I'm going to look. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I add more fields to the planning, right? If I add them, I have to change the edit. So the edit, the instinct would be, oh, well, why is that string? That shouldn't be string. That should be project because it's project on the other side, right? So you've got to avoid, that's what you're trying to avoid here. That's why consistency matters between these two things, because some developer could come along and just change something, and then wonder, and then go through all the same things I've just gone through, right? Why doesn't this do this? Why doesn't, and I have looked it up. I have looked up PrimeNG, form control, I've looked up variations of this. I know how to I know how to show that the value is selected, but it doesn't actually stay selected. Whoa. And they're using NG models, so that's not good. Their examples don't show anything. Yeah. I've got a feeling this won't be the last time that I come across this problem. Let's kind of come through to the end of the stream with hey Napalm, how you doing? With roll back. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Let's remove commands. End of stream. End of stream. My timing is impeccable. I'm not finished yet. I've got another 10 or 15 minutes, but it's. I'm going to try and add. I'm going to try and add as much of a feature as I can in the last 15 minutes. So what I'm working on right now is we have the planning view now looks like this. So you see past due, current, and upcoming. Hopefully, when you're doing this, past due is a pretty small or non-existent panel, right? That's the goal of the review date stuff, right? But the idea being you can go in here now, and I'm going to put the edit for this in here. What we've just struggled with is the fact that this control behaves differently when you're loading it with values versus when you're just setting values initially. Which maybe I reach out to PrimeNG and just ask why it behaves that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement the save for this to allow me to update a project. That's going to involve a few pieces. But yeah, the project's moving along. I think it looks a lot better than it did. Less white on the screen, so less harsh on the eyes. So to do this, and I'm going a bit beyond this because I think I'm working some things out, right? So I'm willing to kind of. This is beyond introducing PrimeNG. This is adding new features. So if I was doing this for real, this would not fly because this is not good practice. So this is. I have to drop. Enjoy. Apex, thank you very much. Thank you for thinking through the problem with me. I do appreciate the chat. It's good to go through this with people, and that engagement is much appreciated. So have a great day. And I apologize for missing your stream. If you didn't know, Apex does stream Godot development. He fired up a stream yesterday, I saw, but I did not get to do it. Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday the month. Nice. More than likely, I will be able to attend the Sunday streams. No worries. Have a great day. So what are you? You are changing nothing. What about that one? Make sure I'm actually making good changes. Label. So this is the detail. Planning. The details. Track. PrimeNG does not. So won't select BIDs. So again, the problem with it, so this will save fine, but I'm going to have to do extra work when I save it. And again, this is, background on this problem. I have to do extra work when I save it because now these IDs that I've selected aren't attached to my project because they're just IDs. So now once I save them, I'm going to have to update the model with those projects. So it's a where do I do the horrible piece? And maybe going through this will actually tell me how to fix it. So it's not the end of the world. So let's stop this running. So update. Is it a patch? Is it a put? Put versus patch. I'm not trying to be restful. I'm just trying to use the right a verb that matters. Because I'm not trying to be restful about the API design. Why is put idempotent? As you noted in your put is considered idempotent when you put a resource. These two assumptions are in play. Using put wrong. In the above example, patch was idempotent. You made a change, but you made the same change again and again. It would always give back the same result. You change the email address to the new value. That's quite a comprehensive answer. So the difference seems to come down to how people understand REST. So I'm going to deviate. I'm starting to think I want to deviate more. And it's not from a want to change this necessarily, because right now I align my endpoint with the verb. That works for the most part, and now that I'm doing the API the way I'm doing it, actually it is more feasible. This isn't using endpoints, this is using GraphQL. I'm not using this to get lists of data, so I don't need a list verb. If I get, it's rare. So yeah, put is going to determine the difference, right? So I'm going to do put. Essentially, this is going to be the same thing. The only difference is obviously this is going to be public GUID identifier. Got to decide on the consistency of that as well. So an ad's about to start. I apologize. It will run for about 1.5 minutes on Twitch. YouTube, I have no control over, so I apologize for that. Hey, Captain Fuba, how you doing? How is the front end evolving? It is evolving. I'm getting there. I'm having some dilemmas with controls and behavior today. So, come on, there you go. So the front end, getting the grid in there, getting the past due, the current, etc. And now the pop out. This is using the control from PrimeNG, not my custom. I think this one still uses yeah, that's my overlay from Tailwind. This is the PrimeNG version. I think it looks a little better because it grays out the extra area, and it does have a border down there, so it makes it pop a little bit more. So working on providing the update facility to change the update itself here. But it's starting to come together. Although this does, I'm focused on this part right this second, but the requirements and stuff for the extra pieces that are going to be in here that I've still got to consider. What does it mean to do that? Because this panel right now is kind of small, right? What do I do with that? So, okay. So let's go and planning application, planning items, commands. We're going to create a new item. Actually, we're going to do this the right way. I'm going to start with a unit test. Concerning planning item, when Hey Futura, how you doing? C grouping is working fine now. Yeah, so it took a while to do. So the way that I ended up doing this was I created this was, I'm not sure how good this was, but it does work. So I created oh, that's a different thing. Planning a review window, a model. So I created a review window style. So I have past due, current, and upcoming, and in those review windows, I have the rules as to what constitutes that data. And I kind of hardcode. I have a static combination of all of them. And then in the view side of things, when I'm getting the list of planning items, I say, actually right now I don't do that. I don't need to do anything in here. How do I do it? Items review window. So in the actual store that I have, stores, planning items store, features, planning items query, I have a computed thing that goes and gets the windows, and then I guess all the data and then maps it with its a review window and priority, and then the grouping works. So it just manipulates the object into a new form that has the right data on it to give me the grouping and stuff. So these are planning items plus, but the grouping is handled by the grid. So it works pretty nicely. It moves past you up there because I set the priority, and it puts them in the order you need to review them in. Yeah. So still done in one call. The code is segmented enough so there's not a bunch of logic in one place. I can add a review windows. So if I wanted to add, if I wanted to break this out further and say next month, next year, etc., I could still create I could still create those windows and just modify this object, and it would group them that way. And I can create, if I wanted to introduce those windows, I could still do that and create different collections here. So this is like an advanced enum, essentially. You'd say review window.pastU, these are statics, and then there's a private constructor, so you can kind of create them. And I use this pattern a lot in C# as well, so it was nice to be able to do that. But it keeps it clean, it keeps it all handled. And the logic isn't dumped up into the front end, which is, one of the concerns. Okay. So I'm not going to get much more done today. When no changes are made, fact result is it a success? I'm not sure what the result types are. It does mean I can refactor these tests that I've just done that now. When assigned, when not assigned, that makes them much more readable. Project is associated. I've never touched C# this deep. What is that fact attribute? So this is a unit testing framework called XUnit. So what I'm doing here, before I actually start writing the code, I'm going to start writing my unit tests, right? So this is an assertion. I have a different style to unit testing than some. So the general rule of a unit test is you are kind of working on one thing, one unit of work, one piece, and focusing what are the behaviors of that piece. So the fact is things I am stating should happen, right? So in this instance, when I'm adding a planning item and it is assigned, I should expect these things to be true. So the tenant identifier should be set, the planning item has a date added, the review date is set, the title is set, the description is set, the created by user ID is set, the signed user ID is set, the planning item was saved, and the planning item did create a domain event. It queued a created domain event, right? These things should happen when this thing changes, right? So I configure it all up, and then I execute the call with data I control, and these things are then tested. And if they fail, if I run the actual tests, I should see all green, right? So there's not a lot of tests in this application so far, but I do try and do this. But I should be able to run all the unit tests for the entire application structure, and everything should be fine. Also, these are run when I commit the code. So before I do any merges or anything, I do know that the tests have passed. So I can see planning item, concerning planning item, when assigned, right? So actually I need to refactor, adjust namespaces. That will change that readability there. So concerning planning item added, when assigned, when no projects, when not assigned, when project is assigned. So I can see these assertions. So these are those facts that are showing there. Test-driven design, interesting. I try. It's a discipline that is easy to drop out on. So especially when I'm streaming it, I do get a little bit more concerned over whether I should be spending that time. So, but yeah. So here, what I'm validating, and again, you kind of build on the unit tests. What I want to test is my subject here will be the update planning item to handler. So again, you have a single subject. You're not testing the system here. This isn't an integration test. This is a unit test, a piece of work. Again, this doesn't exist yet. And then ultimately, I'll be testing that private result I'll be testing that result dot is success is true, right? And I'll be doing result equals subject dot handle new update planning item dot command, and then I'll have all the data in here. Not to be confused with those results, but whatever. And then when I act on that, I should see these things happen. Right now it won't compile, so I've got to get it to compile first. So I could do something like, no. Reference to the project view application. This is the problem when you have the same things represented in different places. This is not the right place, right? This update planning item here is not the planning item I want. So yeah, I got to make sure I didn't add an unnecessary dependency there. Luckily that undoes the thing. Because what I would do is I'd create this type, and I would create I'm going to stub out enough of the code to make it kind of do what it should do. The reason that doesn't work is because that's actually an I command, not I request. Oh, this is command. Do that. Right. The code will compile now, even though it's in my test library. It's not where it should be. The code will compile, and then when I run the unit test, that fact is going to fail because I get an object reference. If I do what am I in basic? The from result. So if I do that now, yeah, you've got to kind of do it. Subject equals new handler. There you go. My test passes. The system's broken, nothing happens, but it passes, right? So now I've got to write the next test to make it not pass. So when assigned user is changed, right? Fact date updated, and I think I have a date updated. Last updated. Last updated is set. What else do I want to test? I want to test that the assigned user is changed. Right. Depending on how the behavior of the system is, I might want to test, okay, well, if the assigned user was set, is an event published, right? Is there other things? So what I'm doing is I'm validating the pieces that I'm going to write. I haven't even written the code yet, but I'm trying to outline what I actually want to validate. And the idea of doing it this way is that you are kind of thinking about what you need, not what you think you need. Because if you're writing the code, you can make things up as you go along. It's very easy to write in assumptions. The unit tests are aimed at trying to make you think through that process before you actually write. And it's not just writing unit tests; it's test driven. So I'm building the code off of the test. I'm not building the test off of the code. Again, a refactor here would be to move this now. So I should move this to planning items, application planning, planning application, planning items. So I can move that out now. And now I've got update planning item there, actually there. But my test should still fail. This one will all pass because there's nothing in it. So if there's nothing in it, it's fine. That'd be just cheating myself to do it that way. Again, unit testing is kind of a personal thing. It's like, there's different opinions on how it should work, what we should do. So, okay. Well, unfortunately, that's me out of time. I've gone over by about 15 minutes. I will resume this tomorrow, if not later on today, if I can do. Basically, I'll work out all these unit tests. So figure out, okay, what does updating the planning item look like? Get all those pieces in place, get it tested, and then I can wire up the front end to make that happen. So when I go in here and change these things or change this data, I can do that. I might start looking as well tomorrow while I'm doing the UI stuff is what does it look like to put validation in the client? Oftentimes you kind of have shared business rules between the back end and the front end in terms of validation. Where does it make sense to put that? How does it function? Do I end up duplicating things over and over and again? Right? That's often a challenge I've come up against, and I don't think I've ever had a super satisfactory answer to that. But the review date cannot be in the past is going to be a key requirement, right? It can only be in the future. Can you set it infinitely in the future? That's a deeper. I think that's a project setting that we'll have to dig into. But yeah, it's coming along. It's looking better. I apologize if you came in here and game dev is something you were interested in, and I'm not doing game dev. This is my balance. I do two days right now on game dev and 3 days on the app dev. This project is not something I want to give up on. It's something I feel passionately about. So I think it's starting to take shape. So yeah. Anyway, so let's go and raid sorcery. I like raiding sorcery because it's where I'm going to go and hang out. I don't do much chatting these days because sorcery stream is often quite busy now. But it's she does a fantastic job of streaming, and she does a fantastic job of keeping focused on the game. Which is really coming along nicely. So let's go raid sorcery. I will be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Eastern. Try and get more of this done, get some unit tests in there, get this code up and running, and then move on to the next piece, which is now figuring out, okay, well, I've got this nice panel now for editing, but that's not why I did this. I've got all the requirements and stuff. What does that look like? Because I kind of like the editing panel, but it's there's way more information in here that's attached. So yeah, we will dig more into that tomorrow. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. See you soon.